Safe. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today, our third session of the NC WIDA eLearning Club. Today is January 11th, 2022, a new year. So thank you for joining us. We have an agenda today. Well, this is a reminder for you to have all the information that we have shared in the previous sessions. We have this document with the archives that you can access via this bit.ly link, NC WIDA eLearning Club. We put it in the chat in a few minutes so you can access. And also, if you want to be a guest speaker, just send me an email and we can talk about which workshop you are working on and what are the strategies you would like to highlight during one of our sessions. So in that document, you see all the information, the schedule,
Do you want me to go into the document?
It's okay. If you want to, yeah,
Sure.
let's do it. And see will we get more people. I see Erica has joined, so welcome. And this document has different slides, and you can see what is the purpose of the club, what is it that we do, how do you access the different workshops. Then we have a flyer from WIDA where you can read the descriptions. If you go back to the cover, Susan, you can
Sure.
see, awesome. You can see the archives. We have a YouTube playlist. So we are adding all the different videos there so you can go and explore. You have access also to the presentations, the slide decks in Google Slides format, and we add them as we have our sessions. So if you have missed one of those sessions, you can go back and check. And then if we go back, you see some additional resources. Every time we have one session, some of our guests highlight some resources and we add those to this list. And I'm still looking at the last resource on the list, the data dashboard. That's an amazing resource that we had our guest speaker share during the second session. I was fascinated to learn about refugees and the different programs that are available to help them, and just learning about the population and where those different programs are located and the amount of refugees and the different languages. It's just fascinating. So if you like to see data, then that's a tool that you will really enjoy. And also, if we go back, maybe we can go back to our slide deck.
Sure.
Then we'll see the sticker collection. That is the next one of the next slides before our agenda. There you go.
That one? Okay.
Yeah, let's go to that one. And then we can just talk about the agenda, and then I'll turn it back to you, Susan, when we finish.
Okay.
That. So let's go back. One
There you
more.
go.
There you go.
One
So
more?
we're going to stay there. When Susan was showing the archives, one of those options in the archives is this, the sticker collection. And we thought that one way to document your journey as you complete the different workshops, or even if it's only one this year, if you say like, I want to complete one, then that's fine. And then how you can document that. And you can make a copy and have your own. You can edit it. We have also shared a folder with the different stickers, and the stickers are just something like gamifying this project and making it fun. So if you completed one workshop, then you have a sticker and you can put it in your card, and then you start making those collections. And if you use social media, then you can use the hashtag eLearning Club, and then you share what you're doing and you can see a sample. And it's sort of like having some fun and sharing what we're learning in these sessions and the different workshops we are completing. So we can look at the next slide. I think it's the previous one, actually, Susan. I think we're going.
Okay.
Just leave it
You
there.
got me out of order. Okay. No, we'll go there to the agenda.
Yeah, so we have the link if you want to access these slides, but still you can have the archive folder and then you have everything there. You don't need to worry about going to different links. You have everything in one single place. So we talked about the club card already. We are going to highlight one workshop today, the Social Studies Engaging Multilingual Learners Through Inquiry. And we have a special guest, Justyn Knox. She's a K-12 social studies education consultant at NCDPI, and we're really excited to have her today. And maybe Susan is going to share more about her. And Susan, my colleague from the ESL Title III team, she's joining me today to lead this session. So now I turn it back to you, Susan, and thank you.
All right, so I'm going to just jump right over to for those of you who haven't been able to engage with this e-learning workshop, by all means, if you have a chance, please do. It's 4 hours of your time, and I know it's 3 to 4 hours of your time, depending. It took me about 4.5 hours just because I'm a bit of a slower reader, but it just talks about how we can access the assets of our multilingual learners, our English learners. And it talks, the thing I really, really liked about it was it talks about how we craft our questions when we're teaching students, and in the way that we create these questions. It's a really thoughtful and reflective way to think about how we're trying to elicit information from students. So I don't know if you've started yet, but if you haven't, by all means, please feel free to do so. Um, and I think it will be. Sometimes you do these e-learning opportunities online, and I do. Sometimes I do them and I think, oh, this is boring. This is boring. I was not bored for 1 second in this workshop. I thought it was really good. So we also talk about creating tasks that promote meaning making while supporting the content and language development, getting kids to do things that help them engage and connect to the content, and really fun activities. And then how do we ensure that our primary and secondary sources that we use in these activities are things that our English learners or our multilingual learners can access and make sense to them? So these are a couple of the things that I really liked in this workshop. I just took pictures of them. This type of questioning just talks about what the questions are and the definitions around them. And then it also talks about what these questions will solicit. And I really liked that. When I was teaching, I was a big map user, and it's hard to see, but when you go through the program, you'll see this graphic organizer that I thought was a really good tool for our students. And then more about considerations for selecting primary and secondary sources for English learners. Sometimes we're told, okay, you have to use this textbook or you have to study this work, but we as ESL teachers know we have to support that learning in another way, or content teachers know this as well. We have to support that learning in another way using other sources that our students will understand. And they just walk us through, this workshop walks it through in a very simple, well-organized way to think about your secondary sources. And then I just want to remind everybody that once you complete the resource, you're going to be asked a couple of questions, and then you will get a certificate of completion. And it looks just like this, and it tells the title, the date you completed it, and I don't know, it does say content hours. There it is right there. It's completed 4 hours of instruction. So depending on your PSU, whether or not your PSU will allow you to use this as CEUs, I certainly think it is worth every CEU, every hour. And then, as Sattli mentioned, Justyn Knox, who is a social studies consultant for us at DPI, has agreed. She also participated in the workshop, and she's agreed to talk about this from a social studies standpoint of view. So Justyn, thank you so much for your willingness to be here. I am going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Susan, for having me and inviting me. And like Susan said, I really enjoyed taking that course and highly recommend it because I learned some things from the course as well. So we're going to talk really today about how to infuse inquiry in the social studies. And inquiry has always been an important approach to us. I've been with the department since 2013, and we've always talked about inquiry. But recently, we just adopted new standards for social studies, and it was so important that we decided to make inquiry a strand within the standards. So, every one of your students that is taking social studies and is learning under the new standards, the newly adopted standards, have inquiry standards that they are expected to be able to do and use. And so it's very important that teachers are integrating inquiry into social studies. And for these reasons listed here, it's going to help build comprehension. It's relevant to students. It helps with their critical thinking and communication skills. It uses curiosity to prepare the brain for learning. It's going to increase motivation and engagement because you're going to ask questions that are more relevant to their lives, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's going to help students make connections to what they learn and empower them to take ownership of their learning, and also develop those research skills that they're going to need to learn for life to be able to analyze and evaluate sources and be able to communicate their ideas. And then it's going to allow for scaffolded instruction, which we'll also talk a little bit about throughout this presentation. So there are four approaches when we think about inquiry. One is topic based, where it's like if you're going to cover an event or an issue or a set of facts that you're going to look at around an event or an issue. For example, if you're looking at the civil rights movement, that's topic based. That's on an event. Concept based is a lot of what our social studies teachers do because our standards are written to concepts, and this is driven by big ideas, ideas like war or things that are any things that are concepts that's going to bring real world meaning to their content, knowledge, and skills. Another thing is document based. You may have heard of, especially if you're teaching at the high school level, DBQs, document based questions. That's really focused on reading and analyzing a selection of primary sources and then evaluating and analyzing the evidence from those to be able to come up with a claim. And then the last one is project based. And for this approach, it can be investigating something that's going on in the community or the world, and then providing a solution for those challenges that they're investigating. And again, it's making it more relevant to the students' own personal lives and really fostering that democratic citizenship that we want students to be engaged in social studies classes. So one thing to consider when you're thinking about inquiry is to think about what assets your students are going to be bringing, and how to leverage them when engaging students in inquiry. We know that multilingual learners have linguistic assets, and these assets are their talents and their skills in their oral or written language. And they're going to be able to contribute to students' abilities to comprehend and express themselves in one or more languages. And so multilingual learners have the linguistic potential to communicate effectively across multiple contexts, and they can express their thinking in multiple ways. So I want you to think about that as you're thinking about engaging with multilingual learners in inquiry. They also have cultural assets that they are bringing. That's different perspectives, practices, beliefs, different social norms, and ways of thinking. And they have cultural potential that really encompasses a unique and varied perspective, the ability to develop relationships in a global society and navigate through a lot of social cultural context. And so think about the cultural aspects as well that your students bring to an inquiry. They also have varied life experiences, experiential, which kind of relates to cultural. that, they have many have been exposed to unique topics and diverse approaches to teaching and learning throughout their lives. And so they're going to have the ability to bring some experiential prior knowledge to enrich that inquiry as you go through it in social studies. And they also, lastly, bring social and emotional assets with them. And they may have had an awareness that demonstrates empathy for diverse experiences. And many multilingual learners, social and emotional potential has the ability to form and sustain positive relationships and build meaningful interactions among their peers and with others beyond school, especially as you think about in an inquiry, them being able to communicate their ideas and take action on in an inquiry. And I know I talk really fast, so if I am confusing anybody or if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat box, and I can definitely answer any of your questions as we're going through this.
I think you can also unmute yourself if you would like.
Yeah, feel free to do that as well.
Okay.
So when we think about inquiry, this is really getting into how we do inquiry in social studies. We ask two types of questions, okay? And the first one is a compelling question. And this is what's going to get your students interested in the inquiry. It should be attached to an enduring issue, a concern. It should be debatable. It should not be able to be answered with just a yes, no. It's going to require that students use specific disciplines like economics or geography or history to be able to answer the question. And it also should be able to allow students to think from multiple perspectives. It's going to prompt students to also respond by doing a task. We talked about that before, where they would communicate their ideas, maybe even to their peers, their classmates, their school community, or they could take action. They could write letters. They could hold an event. They could do a public service announcement, something to help educate others on what they learned. For example, a compelling question might be, should we raise the federal minimum wage? Okay, that could be a compelling question in American history, eighth grade, our civics classes. It could span across several different grade levels and topics, and it's debatable. It focuses on an enduring issue. It's relevant to many students' lives, and it connects to our standards. So once we have our compelling question, should we raise the federal minimum wage? Then we think about, okay, what am I going to need to know to be able to even answer this question or to go about answering this question? And then that gets us to our supporting questions. So supporting questions are going to guide the inquiry. They're going to refine the question, provide direction for it, provide scaffolding, especially for our multilingual learner students, and then lead students to the completion of it. So, for example, okay, if my question is, should we raise the federal minimum wage? Then what do I need to know to even be able to answer that question? Well, one of my supporting questions might be, well, what is the federal minimum wage? A lot of your students may not even know that. Okay. And do different states have different minimum wages that maybe are higher than the federal minimum wage? Maybe that's another question I might need to know. So just start thinking about letting your students even come up with their own wonderings once you ask the compelling question. Let them think about some supporting questions that they might need to know to be able to even start thinking about how to tackle this inquiry. Okay? So when you're thinking about creating a compelling question with multilingual learners in mind, it's important to consider the following things, all right? We want to ask ourselves, is the question really relevant to their students' lives? So the one that I just asked, you know, should we raise the federal minimum wage? I think that a lot of your students would say that that's relevant to to their lives, because it impacts many of their parents and aunts and uncles or sisters and brothers or grandparents. Does it lead to authentic and meaningful learning? I think that it would. And students are going to be able to explore this question from a historical perspective. You know, how has the federal minimum wage changed over time? From an economic perspective, you know, how does it impact our economy? From a geographical perspective, again, do certain states pay above the federal minimum wage already? And it's going to leverage students' knowledge and experiences. So, if again, we talked about those four assets that many multilingual learners bring to inquiries, and so it's going to be able to leverage those experiences as well.
I think I want to be in your class, Justyn.
I think this would be a fun thing to
I
debate.
do too. I
I was
really do
thinking about
too.
it, yeah.
And there's so many great, compelling questions that teachers come up with. There's many already. If you just do a Google search for compelling questions, there's so many already on the web, and there's a lot of great inquiries that are already been created. And so it's really relevant to the students' lives, I think. And I love engaging in inquiry with students because it gets them excited about the learning and not just like, oh, we're going to learn about World War II today, or, you know. And I don't think they find it quite as and fact based driven and, you know, rote memorization. They really start to get engaged and think about how they can take action. Well, let's think about this question. You know, what could they do to help inform and educate others? You know, whether they think it should or should not be raised. You know, they could create PSAs. They could write to their legislators. They could, you know, do social media campaigns to educate others, and just learn how to dialogue and debate with each other in a meaningful way. So, we absolutely loved inquiry. Some considerations when creating a task for inquiry. You want to think about how you're leveraging your student assets. We talked about that. You're also going to want to make sure you provide students with opportunities to make meaning of the material. For example, you want to make sure, especially for multilingual students, that you're providing them with audio text, with visuals, with maps, with artifacts, with interactive articles. So different ways that they can make sense of the material. And then you want to make sure you create opportunities for students to make meaning in their native language. So for example, they could create a PSA in their native language, right? And multiple different languages. So I think that's a cool opportunity for students to bring their own prior experiences, their own language to
That's
the
a,
inquiry.
that is a really fun idea.
Yeah, I've seen that done before with inquiries, where teachers allow students to educate, you know, their own families and communities in their native language, and it is amazing. And it empowers the student, you know.
Right.
And then make sure you're explicitly developing the language skills necessary for that task so students can make articulate claims and have evidence to back it up. So developing those language skills is very important as we go through the inquiry process. As you're thinking about selecting sources, because again, if I'm thinking about, okay, my compelling question is, should we raise the federal minimum wage? As the teacher, I have to find credible sources for my students to be able to even go about considering the answer to this question, okay? And as we think about multilingual learners, I may need to adapt some sources for them by excerpting, by modifying, or even annotating sources already for them. And so and sometimes it might require all three adaptations as we're talking about primary source documents, especially if we're going to ask students to look at the history of the minimum wage over time. But we also need to think about, does it include the necessary background information that multilingual learners need to be able to make meaning from the source? especially if you have students that didn't even know what a federal minimum wage was. This is their first time learning about it. Um, we need to think about the language demand in the text of the source. Is if it needs to be adapted, perhaps what words or phrases might need to be supported or pre-taught prior to giving the students the source. If there's a translated version of the source for multilingual learners with grade level literacy skills in their first language, and then, is there a similar source, like in a different medium, for maybe this less text dependent that could be used? And so, these are all things that you just want to think about as you're thinking about finding those primary source documents that students can use to engage in the inquiry. And again, I know I have talked really fast and gone through this really fast, but if you have questions or if you're just like, wait, I need to go back, please feel free to unmute yourself or type your question in the chat box, and I'm happy to answer it.
I'm not sure if you can see the chat. Justyn, you have a comment. This is a very informative session. So I think you got us all super excited about how to integrate this in our classroom. So it's super cool.
Great. I can't see the chat, but yeah, if there are any questions or anything that comes up, please feel free to just shoot them at me. But yeah, I appreciate that.
I agree. This has been your suggestions and ideas are excellent. Makes me want to go back and teach this project.
I know.
I want to go have this debate with my students.
And the beauty of this, and it's a tool for our English L teachers because this is coming from a social studies expert. So content area teachers will see the value in this because it's for all their students, not just a specific group. It's for all of them. So it's, hey, look, this works, and in this way you can help all our kids and not just develop language. It's more critical
That's right.
thinking and all that. So it's, yeah, I'm super excited. Let's go back, Susan. We have to be in Justice class though.
I was thinking that when I was going through this e-learning, when you were looking at the videos and watching the videos, like most things with ESL, they really apply to all students, and you can incorporate. There are very good ideas. These are really good suggestions and strategies on how to bring your EL students into the classroom, how they can just fit right into the regular social studies class that you happen to be teaching, no matter what their language level is. There are some great ideas in here on how you can incorporate them into your content class. I don't see anything more in the chat or anybody willing to unmute. Be brave and unmute.
And take advantage of this. It's a small setting, these meetups. That's the goal of the session. That you can unmute, ask your questions, maybe share an experience, something that you feel like I use this. I also started this self-paced workshop, and just share. Feel free. This is a safe environment and something you might have done in the past or something you're thinking about integrating for next units or next year. So and just take advantage of having, I know I'm saying it wrong, Justyn, I always say it wrong,
Justyn.
Justyn. Having her here and ask your questions and just share whatever you think it will be super cool because I think we have some time and based on the slides, we finished.
That's right.
Um, I I left for a second, but I came back. But maybe you've already gone over this. But quick question: do you have any specific tips and tricks on how to help ELs build their background knowledge um, in social studies?
Um, I think it depends on the topic. What I would do is try to, with especially with the primary source documents, would be try to scaffold that and try to introduce them to some of the language or the vocabulary um, that they might encounter in those primary source documents beforehand. So if a teacher is going to be doing certain content, then maybe the day before, kind of preloading some of that vocabulary, because I think that's where a lot of the students really get hung up on, you know, just a level of not understanding or comprehending is some of the vocabulary there.
Okay, on a similar lines, a question: what if it's an absolute newcomer? His first time in the country, and he has no clue what is federal. The minimum wage. How do we go about with that? Because he has no English, he has no concept, he has no knowledge of what is going on in this country.
That's where I would, and I'm not saying this is the, the exact same right thing to do, but
Yeah.
when I was in the classroom and I taught in Durham public schools, and I would find that content in their native language,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can have a understanding in their native language of what we're even beginning to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and then scaffold the material as needed. But if they have no English, just no ability to speak English, then what I would try to do, and I know it's hard to differentiate for so many different languages, but I think in order to help students even have any type of ability to be empowered through inquiry, we have to help them learn the content knowledge where they're at, while scaffolding and also introducing, you want to present both, but we have to present the information to it in a way they can comprehend and understand it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's hard in a high school setting, because we just have blocks and we have limited time.
Yeah. And I mean, I know this may not be best practice either, but I had so many students too that would help translate, and it empowered them as a tutor and a leader in the class to
True.
be that person's buddy, and would help translate and help them understand. Even if I couldn't speak it, it was written down, but if they could help orally translate it, I
Mm-hmm.
had many students that just stepped up as leaders, and it empowered that student as well to be a leader and a helper, and to students that are struggling, like the student you mentioned.
Mm. Thank you so much.
I don't know, Susan, Zotley, y'all, you guys may have other ideas.
I no. Well, hold on. Yeah, sorry, I was just checking to see if I was muted. No, those are great suggestions on how to. Newcomers are always hard. They're always difficult, but the trick to getting, for me, was getting, as Justyn said, giving them the information in their native language, and then just getting them engaged in the process with the other kids, because you've seen it yourself, I'm sure, that when newcomers are there, they're shy, they're not sure what to do, but when other kids engage with them, they lose some of that. It's
Mm-hmm.
their peers are engaging them in the class rather than the teacher, and it's a lot less daunting for newcomers when they have peer partners, and they have the information, they have it in their language, in their first language, if possible. I mean, Google Translate isn't great, but it goes a long way to get the kids engaged in the topic.
It's true. And I will just add to that, if you share materials in their first language, try to incorporate not only writing, different formats. If you find a video, if there is a song, sometimes different things, short texts, so they get exposed in different ways. And then because sometimes they have those aha moments, they have that face that they don't have a clue what's going on, and you show an image or play a video and they're like, ah, and then it's like it
That's
clicks.
right.
It's like it clicks and they make those connections. So I think that's something that we really recommend using in the classrooms. And I'm sure some of you, I see some that you guys can unmute and share what you have done with your students. But yeah, thank you, Justyn. No, it was great. I love those strategies that you share. We have a shy crowd. I'm supposed to be the shy one. I see some friends, but I don't want to call out anybody because I don't like
I
when
know
that
it's not,
happens.
yeah.
Yes. Like, don't do that to
You
me.
don't want them to call you out.
I know. And you can also use the chat as well if you don't think like I don't want to speak or my mic is not set up, just type in the chat. If not, while you're thinking, I'll remind you that our next session is February the 8th, and we're going to be highlighting a new workshop. If we can click on that link, Susan,
The
please.
e-workshop
Yes.
descriptions, this one? Okay.
Yeah, maybe we can see. We have for our session in February, we have other workshops. We're going to review the previous ones. We have worked on the ELD standards, a collaborative approach. We have worked on the supporting multilingual newcomers. Today we're working on the social studies, engaging multilingual learners through inquiry. And in February, thank you, we are going to work on school improvement planning and leading for equity. These are targeted to administrators. So if you want to go through those workshops, there is one that is 7 hours, the other one is 2 hours, and this give a lot of resources as well on how to help your administrators if you are a teacher in the classroom, like what is it that they should look at when they are in the classrooms and how they can support content area teachers in those practices, what Justyn was saying, what are those practices that we can incorporate that help all students and provide those scaffolds for our English learners or multilingual learners. So we are excited about those two, and we're going to have a couple of lead teachers from the field working on these workshops and sharing their experience and what they're doing in their districts. So please join that session as well. Remember, all sessions are open. You don't have to complete the self-paced workshop, but we recommend it. And if you are, maybe you don't feel like you want to complete it, but you can recommend this to your administrator or work in a PLC and work together, because that's another option. You can download the materials, the different handouts, and complete it with your teams in your schools. So let's see if we got any questions or comments in the chat. If not, I think we can finish our session today. And I really appreciate, Justyn, everything that you shared today and collaborating with us. We really love that you were engaged and willing to help us today. And it's really exciting that we were able to have you today. And I see some friends. Let me see. I don't see anything in the chat. I don't know if you want to say something else. Justyn or Susan, thank you, Susan, for helping today leading this session. Any closing remarks? And I stop the recording.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for taking your time to come this afternoon to engage in this important topic. We know you're busy and you have a million other things to be doing, but you chose to be here with us. So thank you so much.
Very well said. Thank you. I agree with you. And when you have, if you haven't been able to go through this this e-learning workshop, by all means, take the time to do it because it is well worth it. Sattli, thanks for inviting me to participate. I really appreciate it. Justyn, you were great. Thank you very much. And I hope everybody has a safe and healthy rest of the week.